Welcome back, citizens of the Grateful Nation, to another episode of I'm Doing Great. Today is a little bit unique. We don't have Mike here in the studio with us. He had a prior work engagement that he couldn't get out of. It is just me and a very special guest who you have seen before. She's been on the show. Let's introduce our very special guest today. We have Landon Starbuck in the studio. She has been a guest before. Landon, I'll just let you tell everyone who you are and what you do.
All right. Well, I'm a mom of 3, and I run a nonprofit called Freedom Forever. We combat child exploitation and trafficking in America, and we cover all types of exploitation. Obviously, the sex trafficking happening, but also the gender mutilation of children. So those are the things that we combat every day, and our strategy is prevention-based activism. So it's not enough just to be informed. You also have to take action, and we provide the infrastructure, the tools and resources for people to be able to take effective action, because we believe that while rescuing children is good and necessary, it doesn't solve this problem. So we really have to get at the root and educate and inform properly and show people the right direction to take to combat this issue. And we're a volunteer-run nonprofit, so none of us take a salary. We're just all people with different skill sets that just come to the table and do whatever we can to make a difference.
I feel like child trafficking is very rarely talked about in mainstream media, but you mentioned this a little bit the last time you were on our show, but it is a very serious problem that's rampant in our country that nobody really talks about.
Right.
Yeah. And so what are some of the statistics that you could share?
So speaking of statistics, I mean, they can be weaponized a myriad of different ways. So it's very difficult because, for instance, we know that there's trafficking every day at our southern border. We have over 200,000 unaccompanied minors coming across our border, which means they already are being exploited by just being alone in the desert, where 70% of the women and children are raped just on that journey. But they don't collect these crucial data points. And our organization have FOIA'd a lot for these information from ICE, from HHS. And because of this administration, sadly, this is where things become political. You lose the very crucial data that we need to elevate these stories. And now we're just dealing with fighting them for this data because they stopped collecting important data on how many sexual assaults are happening, what's happening to these children once they cross over. We know that we have whistleblowers coming forward that are our own, only real resource for the data points that we need on that issue alone. As far as online sexual exploitation, we do have some really alarming data. We have skyrocketing online recruitment of children for CSAM, child sexual abuse material, which is known as child pornography. Over 22 million reports to NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We have over 19,000 reports of child trafficking. In 2019, I think was the last year we had some really hard data points from the FBI before they, got focused on other things like, white far right nationalism and all that, and decided just to abandon the fight to protect children.
Right.
It was over 50% of sex trafficking cases were involving children. So again, there's so much work that needs to be done collecting these data points on a state level and at the federal level, but it's intentionally not being done. We don't have accurate statistics at this point. So we're collecting little micro statistics to try to awaken people to what's happening in their state.
I mean, this might be a dumb question, but why do you think this is such a suppressed issue?
It's political. It's become political. And not because I wanted it to be or anyone wanted it to be. It's just because we're so divided now that our solutions for problems couldn't be more polar opposite. So, for instance, a lot of the well-funded nonprofits combating exploitation believe different causes of why trafficking exists. And a lot of them believe that poverty is the root cause. And I vehemently reject that. For that to be true, we're demonizing and blaming this horrible evil, the worst evil there is on this planet, on poor people. Poverty is a vulnerability, but no one's vulnerability is the cause for human trafficking, for the evil that these people are exploiting amongst these vulnerable populations. They try to make it a race issue and say human trafficking, because it disproportionately affects people of color, that it's being driven by racism, by white people purchasing black people and brown people. And the reality is all types of children are being exploited. So they racialize this issue. They make it a national white supremacy issue. And anybody who's combating this that is on the right is, marked a QAnon conspiracy theorist. It has been so weaponized. So we have to respond. And when we assert ourselves and respond to that, that's where this whole war comes in, and you're politicizing trafficking and all of these things. But the solutions needed are not to legitimize sex work, which is prostitution. It's to eliminate that, because that drives the demand for more trafficking and exploitation of vulnerable populations.
Right.
So we're not going to agree on the solutions. We can't agree on the statistics. Those are being weaponized. It's a very real problem, which is why, organizations like mine that are speaking truth need more support.
Mm-hmm. And just like you said, this movement of trying to normalize sex work. Sex work is real work.
Right.
And isn't it crazy how the feminists used to believe that prostitution was dehumanizing for women, right? I mean, probably this might be like, I guess, second wave feminism.
Right.
Even like in the 90s, I feel like feminists were not supportive of prostitution because they felt like it was objectifying women in the most heinous ways. But now modern feminism has moved into this realm where they try to convince people that a prostitute's job is just as valid as an accountant or as a doctor or a lawyer or something.
Right.
And of course, this is coupled with the rise of pornography that's readily available to all ages. I mean, I think now the average age that kids see porn, and you might be able to add color to this or correct it, is like 7 or 8.
The average right now is 11 years old.
Okay.
But again, with the statistics, we don't know. I mean, we cannot rely solely on what, mainstream news articles are running the statistics and who's, the arbiter of those.
Yeah. And so with this rise of pornography, I mean, how closely is trafficking tied to pornography? Because many of us know that it is, but when people say that as long as it's two consenting adults, who are we to stop them? Who are you to stop someone from watching pornography if they want to? I don't think any of these people realize how closely trafficking is connected to pornography, right?
100%. Pornography, if we're talking about root causes of driving the behavior that drives the demand to purchase human beings for sex, that in which case you cannot prove that they're consenting or not. I want to ask people, how do you know that person behind the camera is consenting? Because they sign a paper? I mean, what is the criteria for that? Nobody wants to have that conversation because you can't verify some girl in Indonesia, is truly consenting to what's happening. And we have countless stories of survivors of the sex trade that come forward and talk about the coercion, the abuse, the force that was involved, that they were indeed trafficked. With Pornhub, we still have non-consensual image-based sexual abuse on these platforms. I have a friend, an amazing survivor. They still use her image to promote Pornhub. And legally in America, we are still not able to hold big tech and big, porn lobby like Pornhub accountable for what they're doing.
Why not?
Because politicians are owned by big tech. And that's the same reason why we don't have a hold on the child sexual abuse that is rampant all over Instagram, Facebook, all the social media, because there's nobody forcing them to truly have safety mechanisms or just say, hey, these places were never built for children. No children should be on here, period. They want to, they want to harvest the data of kids. They want them on their platforms. It's built-in consumerism that they will have, lifelong customers for. There's so many different nefarious interests, right? Of like how you can manipulate a child a myriad of different ways by hooking them to social media. But the biggest danger is that there's no accountability. There's no incentive for them to keep kids safe, and there's nobody forcing them to. And our politicians in Washington just talk, and they hold little hearings and committees, and they let survivors come speak, and nothing gets done.
Right. And I'll never forget, this stayed with me. This was one of the things from your last episode that stayed with me forever. You explained how people arrive at even consuming child rape content. Yeah. You think, like, when we think about the kind of person that it would take to even search that, you think to yourself, okay, that's a sick, depraved human being that doesn't, that is probably like, is totally isolated, has no family, has no job, like a sicko. But you were explaining last time that it's this desensitization that takes people from watching regular, and I put that in quotation marks, people listening to audio, regular pornography to child rape content. So explain how people can get from point A to point Z. Right.
Well, I mean, it's not just the social desensitization effect of pornography. It's the fact that it is, mimics the addiction in the brain. You need more and more of it, just like a hit of a drug to get a high. And every single pedophile I've ever, every case I've ever dealt with, every single sex offender, every single child sexual abuse survivor, pornography was involved.
Right.
It was part of either grooming the victim or desensitizing the perpetrator to to a place where they would commit a hands-on offense. So you cannot separate the pornography as the high-risk behavior it is with the predation of these child predators. It is directly connected, and you can talk to any law enforcement, and they will corroborate that.
I was watching a clip from some conference at the University of Montreal in 2022. You may have seen it. It kind of went viral. I think maybe Robbie, Landon's husband, commented on it on Twitter. But this professor was saying that every person has some sort of, I even hate to say this, but I'm quoting him, everyone has some sort of sexual attraction to children. And so he was talking about how pedophilia is this, he called it like a latent structure. So he says it's not a dichotomy of some people are attracted to kids and some aren't. He suggests that it's like this spectrum where everyone has some sort of sexual interest in children. And when someone shared this on Twitter the other day, of course it went viral and everyone was talking about how a lot of people were saying this guy was trying to normalize pedophilia. Apparently, this guy's name is Ian McPhail. He is a psychologist, and apparently he does works in a lot of mental health spaces. Apparently, this is what I was reading. His work is meant to prevent child sex abuse and to prevent pedophilia. But I think that model is incredibly dangerous because what happens when everyone has a preference? It becomes normal. Mm-hmm. If everyone has some kind of preference, I even hate to say these words again, but I'm quoting him. If everyone has a sexual preference of children in some kind of way, wouldn't that by definition be that it's somehow normal? I mean, so now we're seeing all this happen where the term minor attracted persons is being introduced into society, and you have all these licensed therapists and psychologists saying that, almost like, basically saying that it's normal to be attracted to kids. I mean, It's really sick.
Well, I mean, I've been covering what I call the pedo agenda for over 10 years when people thought it was crazy. I was a conspiracy theorist for saying that there's a pedophile agenda. This is how it's coming in. One of the biggest ways it's come in is through upper academia with, the history of Keynesian theory and the radical sexuality movement. That is where this research, which was horrific, abuse of infants and children, to legitimize this idea that kids are sexual from birth. They took that idea and that is the whole premise of, the gender theory, modern sexuality theory, feminism. All of that is, pedophilia is the root of all of these ideologies. It's what gives it its basis, because you can't say I can identify as whatever I want and then say you can't be any age you want, or a kid can't be sexual, and you're then depriving them of their right to expression. Right. And that is the ideological or philosophical breakdown. Then you have the fraudulent science, so the scientific support, and then you have the human rights. The UN, UNICEF put out an article saying, is pornography really harmful to kids? I don't know. I mean, they wrote an article saying we don't know that. Science hasn't said that is actually harmful. So every aspect of society, and I provided examples throughout the years, this is coming, this is what's happening. Now everybody's saying, oh yeah, this is totally here, which is fine, but these signs have been here for so long and nobody's held these people accountable. And what you were just bringing up, that point, do you remember that the person who got fired, they actually hired them at Johns Hopkins. I don't know if they're Zims or I don't know what their pronouns are, what they go by, but they got hired at Johns Hopkins to be part of this. I think it's a child protection clinic. And what it actually is, when I looked into it, is to treat pedophilia, which on the surface, like all leftism ideas, sound really nice.
Right.
Like, we're gonna help reach these pedophiles so that they don't harm children. But we're gonna have a pedophile sympathizer lead that initiative. Okay, that makes sense. But what they're doing, and is they're legitimizing it as a sexual orientation. Because if they can do that scientifically, they can change the DSM-5. Then we're going to be at the same place as we are today with gender ideology. And you can't tell a child they can't sexually have experiences because that's part of their identity. And you're abusing them by not letting them have access to information, i.e. the internet and pornography. You're abusing them by not letting them live out their sexuality because you're being a bigot. I mean, that is where we're headed, and it will be here sooner than we even realize.
Wow. So I want to bring up this viral story now.
Yeah.
And this is all I know. I could not even click on the headline. All I saw was that a gay couple in Georgia adopted 2 boys, sexually abused them on a regular basis in their home, and also pimped them out to be sexually abused by other adults. So, and you said that you have done a lot of research on this case. I mean, where to even begin with something as sick as this?
Well, first I got to give credit to Mia at Town Hall because she's the only journalist willing to touch this case. It happened in July, I believe, of last year. And not only mainstream media wouldn't pick this case up because, they shelter and protect the LGBT community, but also local news. I mean, I think the most that happened was a quick write-up, just, child abuse case. But they didn't mention that they were activists. And that is very relevant. The fact that they were LGBT activists that used that platform, that regularly putting pictures of their children online, trading it with hashtags that are well known within the LGBT community. And nobody denounced it. Nobody called it out. They had followers that were open pedophiles following their accounts, commenting on the pictures, all of that. And nobody said anything. So yes, this is very relevant for those saying, well, why are you saying LGBT, in the article? I fully defend, that how she put that article out there because it is very relevant. So many facts about this case. I mean, down to the fact that, they have a love is love neon sign in their home. The fact that these children were horrifically abused. I won't even go into it because it makes me sick to even go there. But one of the worst cases I've heard about or dug into at all. And this went on for so long. How old were the children? I believe they're two boys, 8 and 11, I think.
Were they brothers?
Yes. So they came, I think, from a heroin, abuse situation. Parents were abusing heroin. They were put into the foster care system. They were fast-tracked to this adopted couple, the gay couple, and one of them had a prior accusation or report of sexually raping a 14-year-old boy, I believe. So
What?
Yes, so that was never prosecuted, and that's something that Mia's looking into. Why that happened, why that case was botched. And they put out some generic statement saying, oh, well, the people who worked on that are no longer, working here. They are retired and there's different set of standards now. I mean, it was just a boilerplate damage control response, but that case should be looked into as to why that didn't happen. And I know for a fact that on adoption paperwork, they ask if you've ever been accused of any sort of
course,
sexual abuse, physical abuse, anything involving children. And the fact that he lied on that form or that it was never asked should be inquired. But unfortunately, the adoption agency that adopted these boys out are now defunct. And so one of the other points I wanted to bring up with that is that they recommended another agency, Bethany Christian Services.
Okay. So where in Georgia was this? Was it Atlanta?
I think it was outside of Atlanta.
Maybe
suburb.
like Marietta or something like that.
They were selling their children, pimping them out to other gay men. And one gay man still lives with his mom, and the other one is obsessed with anime. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Like these stereotypes, they do kind of matter when you're looking to understand what behaviors are connected to this. I'm not saying everybody who looks at anime is that, but there are some signs. If you even on Twitter, like there's a large porn anime, pedophilia obsession happening. Very, very, all over the place on social media. So, and again, why are the people that are into maybe clean anime not speaking out or denouncing that? Mm-hmm. Why is the LGBT community, the left movement not calling out the fact that this stuff is happening to children? The only ones I see doing it are Gays Against Groomers.
So how long did this couple have these children?
I don't know exactly how long they had them. I know that they were in the process of trying to, what appears that they were trying to procure a 2 to 3 year old girl. And that's why they went back to that same organization, that same agency that got them the boys to fast track a girl. Obviously can assume that they wanted to, abuse her as well. So thank God they never got to that step, but they were in the process of trying to reach out to Bethany Christian Services again. And people should be aware that Christian organizations, there's a lot of things people don't realize about these organizations. And people need to really look deep into these organizations.
I mean, how did these guys even get through the application process? It's especially upsetting when there are so many couples in this country, good, married, heterosexual couples that really want to adopt. And I hear a lot of stories about how difficult the process is. And I think statistically, I might be wrong, but aren't there more parents that want to adopt than there are children that want to be adopted?
Yes.
I've heard that before. So how could this couple get children?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up because there's a couple of really important points to understand. There's waiting lists for babies and young children, like literal waiting lists, which totally absolves the whole, abortion argument that, they're going to end up in foster care, as if that's an excuse, right? It's horrible saying that, but I'm just saying that there are long lines to adopt a baby or a young child. But foster care is not designed for adoption. It is for family reunification. Unfortunately, that is not where the financial incentives are, which is why I'm a big proponent for either absolving or reforming entirely the structure of that. And that goes back to the Clinton Adoption Safe Families Act, and where they incentivize cash for kids. They tied money to children. So this became an industry.
Oh.
Yes. So the problem with that is that a lot of families are disproportionately affected where they take their children because, poverty is one of the main reasons, which instead of providing them food and resources, they're just taking their children. They're stealing their children. It's legalized kidnapping and giving them to a family that, and a lot of these families are good-hearted families. They're just trying to help, or they're trying to be able to adopt a child. So it's not always their fault. There's incredible foster families. They're just trying to help. But they shouldn't be adopted out, and they shouldn't necessarily be in foster care. Foster care, honestly, should be for the situations where there's no family available, no friends available that meet the criteria for safety for that child to be placed with, which, again, those situations are also very rare. That's the law, but the law is not being followed because there's no money in that. There's no money when you take a child and then place it with the sister or the aunt. There's only money when you put them in the system.
Really?
And that's the problem. There's a really good friend of mine, and she, her child was medically kidnapped and taken, and she was one of the only ones who was able to fight back. And that brings me to the other point, is that your constitutional rights don't matter in family court. You don't have, innocent until proven guilty. That doesn't exist. It's an entire separate system. And the people in charge of investigating that whole process, if things don't go down well or somebody accuses you of something, they're the ones in charge of investigating themselves. So it is a very corrupt system. And I'm not saying everybody who's in it is horrible, but that's the same reason why in Nashville we have children sleeping on the floor of some of these agencies, because we're inundated with children, yet they turn down families who don't have their dog vaccinated. Or they're not vaccinated, or not fully vaccinated.
I was reading something about how families were denied children because they choose natural living.
Yes.
Which is basically like, anti-vax or whatever it is, or maybe they choose to treat ailments or things naturally and holistically versus running to the conventional medical system all the time. And so families like this are denied.
That's right.
Oh my gosh.
And when I posted this article, it brought up so many points from different people saying I couldn't adopt. I was rejected. I was waiting to adopt a child for years, and they told me because I didn't get the COVID shot, I couldn't adopt. And then you think about stories like this where they were fast-tracked to somebody with a prior accusation of rape.
I can't even believe that.
And this happens all the time. That the system has to be reformed, restructured. It is so oppressive. And people, like to talk about, minorities and this and that. It disproportionately affects minorities because of the poverty statistics, because they're taking children from parents who are struggling. They're food insecure. And they can take a child for any reason.
They can?
Yes. They can for what they deem neglect, but who defines what neglect is?
Right, it's subjective,
isn't it? It is entirely subjective, and that's why these communities are disproportionately targeted. And there's countless, websites and videos of families who've been traumatized by this system.
There's this, so when, all these child trafficking allegations were brought against Madonna, some people were like, well, those kids are definitely better off with her than living in poverty in Malawi. A lot of people were saying this, and it really reminds me of, you can't deny that Americans, we're very materialistic. We are a very materialistic consumerist society. So we have been bred to believe that money and wealth is always, no matter what, inherently better than not having much at all. Right. And so this is how you arrive to the point where, well, if a person's rich or if a person is at least financially comfortable, they are automatically a better environment and a better place for children to live. When even when I know these statistics you can't really say that they're accurate, but a lot of books that suggest that there are certain countries that are happier than others. A country that's always in the top 5 happiest countries is India. Really, really poverty-stricken countries. The U.S. is not even in the top 10. The U.S. is actually, they say, is one of the unhappiest places to live. People report being very unhappy here, right? And we're one of the wealthiest countries, and so we're stuck in this weird thinking that just because someone has money or is financially comfortable, they're automatically going to be a better caregiver. Right. Now, of course, these accusations against Madonna are accusations, but I mean, you look at the way that she is, the way that she lives and how sexual she is. It's like people automatically think that that's better than like a child who may be living even maybe below the poverty line in a country like Malawi. And so I hear this and it's like, just because parents are food insecure or they're struggling financially, like the children are just automatically removed because they're just better somewhere else.
Right. And again,
That's
instead
awful.
of assisting them with that, community-led, initiatives say, hey, we have a food pantry, we have this at our church. Instead of assisting those families who are in those situations, they're stealing their children and attaching a price tag to their children and then adopting them out. And so here's the other problem. I think it's in some cases 1 to 2 years, but after the child has been in the system for that long, they say, well, you know what, we have to do what's best for the child. They need stability. We're going to adopt them out. Okay. And again, you have an innocent family who's just trying to help and adopt a child, and then they adopt them out. But the problem is that a family who's trying to get their child back, they have to be able to fight legally in the system. And if they don't have money to fight for their child, they lose their child. This is legal child trafficking.
And there's no way those families have the kind of resources to fight that.
No. And I deal with families almost every week that are even fighting just in the child sexual abuse realm, where they're trying to leave, a husband who's sexually abusing them and their children. And they can't because they can't even afford a lawyer.
Oh my gosh.
And there's no CASAs available. That's a court-appointed special advocate in their area. So if you can't fight the system, your child gets stolen. Your child has to go back to the abuser. So it's not just in the trafficking and also in this child welfare system.
I've been hearing stories here and there too of basically like medical kidnapping because a mom refuses a vaccine for her child.
Right. And Candace.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that. And Candace has done such a good job of highlighting this vaccine craziness of how like, if you choose not to give your child certain shots, like you're automatically deemed this horrible mother, they're going to threaten to call CPS. And like someone like Candace has the voice and the bravery and the resources to fight if anything were to be tap into something to her children. But I've heard stories of moms giving birth at the hospital and their baby is literally taken away because they don't want the baby to have the Hep B shot.
That's right.
I mean, that's insane.
It happens all the time. And, parents need to know their rights, and that's why we're partnering with other organizations to be able to provide parents education on what do you do if CPS shows up at your door? What are your rights? How do you conduct yourself? What legal advocacy groups are there to help support you if you find yourself in that situation? Even something like not making your well visits. I mean, they can find anything. If you ever looked at an adoption or a foster care application, I mean, they want to know about your sexual boyfriends and histories and your past. They want to know if your dog's vaccinated, if they're fixed. They want to know every aspect of your life. So if you had some dirty dishes on the day they did a home check, or your other child says, yes, I've been spanked, they can find any reason not to adopt out a child to a loving family, with natural health and discipline and all those things. And find any reason they want to keep them in the system. And I'm not saying everybody there is in this conspiracy to like make money off the kids. It's just the way the system is motivated. It's inherently structured that way. Yeah. So it inevitably operates that way. And
it's especially concerning when you think about the fact that all of these children are going to grow up to be, they're traumatized. Mm-hmm. They're going to grow up to have all of this real, true trauma. The word trauma gets thrown on way too often these days. Women say that they're traumatized because someone called them fat when they were like 10 or something. Yeah. But these children are going through true trauma. And this is, as cheesy as it sounds, is the future of our country. Mm-hmm. So you have like all of these children that are going through all these different homes and they're being raised by strangers and they're truly traumatized. And then you think about the future of our country, it's really concerning because I think what's being done, and I say this can be applied to any arena. It can be applied to the fat acceptance movement, to the trans stuff, to even the LGBT, whatever their agenda is. Everything has been transferred over to kids. Yeah. So it used to be, we just want gay people to be able to get married. That has turned into, we need to teach children about gay sex in school. Mm-hmm. At first it was, oh, you should just accept a trans person for the way that they are. And now it's, we need to let a 6-year-old transition because he feels that he's a girl now. Right. Even down to like fat acceptance. We need to accept obese people the way that they are. And now there was the American Academy of Pediatrics saying that we need to be giving weight loss surgery or drugs to obese children because there's no other way to cure their obesity.
Right.
And so there's a war on children right
is.
now. And I feel like nobody's really talking about it. And it's extremely concerning because I think it's going to destroy the future of our country.
Absolutely. That's why we need a parenting revolution, because
Yeah.
if we're not going to fight for our kids, we have no hope for any of these other issues anybody claims to talk about or care about.
Yeah.
If we can't protect our children, there is no future for America or for the safety of and freedom of every individual.
Yeah. We were talking before we started rolling, we were having lunch and we were talking about how the right is just not good at mobilizing. The left is excellent. They have everything put together, even down to the way that flyers look.
Yes.
Even down to their marketing, the way their branding.
It's so true. I mean, the first step is admitting the problem. Yes.
Everything looks good. They get people on the streets to protest. And I asked you this off camera, what is it about the right that makes it so hard to mobilize? Why don't people on the right show up?
Okay. So I'm just going to share some observations. I'm not being judgmental. I'm not pointing fingers. These are just observations from an activist perspective of, I know how much work it takes to do these things, to make the flyer, to mobilize, to set up things, to get insurance, to get security, like to just do one little protest or event. Because it's way harder for us, I'll give us that, to do an event, because the left sends their fake Nazis to show up so they can get bad optic pictures. They send their controlled media to get those photos. So there is a lot more effort involved for us to do a good event. But here's the thing. I've had a mom say, I love what you do. I'd love to go to your event, but I have to pick up carpool. And I said, I have to pick up carpool. I have 3 children.
You've got 3.
I have 3 children. And I don't have a nanny. I pick up my children every day.
Yep.
Okay. And sometimes I'm late. I'm the late mom, the very last car. My kids are like,
That's definitely going to be me. I'm always late.
I mean, but I'm also running a nonprofit.
Yeah.
I'm also organizing things. We need help. We need people to rise up. So here's some of the observations I've noticed. Yes, there's an overall apathetic, lazy attitude happening. Okay. There's I'm going to sit in my armchair and watch other people. I'll let the activists do it. Landon's a great activist. She'll do it. Robbie will do it. Gina will do it. Candace will do it. Matt Walsh will do it. Let's let them. They're awesome. I don't do that. And there's some great people that'll show up, right? And there are some people, very grateful they do help. I'm not discounting them. But the whole movement, we need every single person to show up, whether it's their event or not, or their cause or not. We're fractured of here's the medical freedom community, here's the child, community. Oh, I already went to one protest. I'm not going to support the other one. We need people showing up to everything, because all of these matters affect all of us, and we have to be fighting as much as we can. I mean, is it really so much to ask at least once a month to attend an event, protest, donate, do whatever you can to support? So there's that. But there's also this belief I've noticed that somehow activism or protesting is a left-wing thing. And we have this idea of those crazy ladies with the yarn pussy hat doll.
Yeah.
What are they called? The pink pussy hats or whatever? And we're I don't do that.
I don't do that.
I'm a Christian mom. I have my skinny jeans. I don't want to go there and get something thrown at me. It's dangerous. There's fear, and there's just all of these excuses. And I just want to say, none of your life, your skinny jeans, your life, the life that you have now is going to matter if you don't stand up now for your children.
Yeah.
They won't have this Pinteresty perfect Instagram that you're trying to preserve. They won't have that.
Yeah.
And the luxury that you have, sitting at home and spending the time with your children, they're not going to have that in the future. And it's such a beautiful thing. That's what we're fighting to preserve. We want you to have that. I want to have that. But if we don't fight, we're not going to have anything. So that attitude of this is a left-wing thing. Protest doesn't do anything. I've heard that one. Protest doesn't do anything. Okay, our country literally was founded on protest.
Yeah. Exactly.
If you don't have 1A, you don't have 2A.
Yes.
You have nothing.
Yeah.
So you can, compelled speech is forced speech.
Right.
And the abolishment of 1A.
Yeah.
So that's what we're fighting right now.
Yeah.
I don't get how people don't understand we're in a war.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, it's because they live in everyone, we have the comfort of our home. I get that. But it's almost like a lot of people want to live in denial. They don't really quite want to admit that it's a scrappy fight right now. And the left is winning. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, the left is winning. And when we let the left take over culture, and then we let the left take over education, the university system, that was that in and of itself made a huge turn in our society and our culture and our country. But then you couple that with a lot of people who just don't really want to show up and don't really want to mobilize. And they have this attitude like, oh, well, when it comes to my doorstep, I'll do something about it. But the thing is, it has come to people's doorsteps. And like we were talking about, there are people who say, I'm really against using someone's preferred pronouns, but but we'll use them at my kid's school because but we don't agree with it. I'm like, if you don't agree with it, but you're using their preferred pronouns, like you are stepping into their system. Like you're stepping into, and you're admitting that their view is valid.
Right. We're legitimizing gender ideology, which is the fast track to sex changes and the destruction of children's identity.
Yeah.
And that's the scary thing too, is that parents, how readily they are to send their kids back into the environment that they know is grooming them. They know that is indoctrinating them. They know that they're being subjected to pornographic books, but they just keep making excuses. I don't know, out of convenience or what it is, but we have to have a parenting revolution, an awakening of like, no more. We take our kids out. We do whatever it takes to preserve our children. If we can't fight for them again, I don't know why anything else matters at this point.
Yeah.
And there's so many parents just delusional about what's happening, and they contact, you get the same messages like, I found this pride flag in my classroom. I found this. What do I do? And it's like, well, number one, there's tons of videos that I put out all the time of telling you what to do, but you have to be the one. If you don't have those mama bear instincts, tap back into that. You are powerful. We have to reclaim our rights as parents. Nobody else is going to solve this for us.
Yeah.
We can't go knocking on the politicians' doors and expect them to show up at our school and fix it, or our school board. We should run for those things and take over those positions, but that's a long game. I mean, that's not a strategy.
No, yeah,
so,
it's not. And I think a lot of it too is related to, I mean, I don't want it to sound harsh or judgmental, but it related to how a lot of parents are kind of removed from their children's lives in a lot of ways. I would say probably most families are both parents working in an office, and they're gone for maybe 8 to 10 hours a day. And then, you only really see your children in the evening or in the morning or on the weekends. And that's a level of removal when both of the parents are not really seeing their kids every single day for many hours of the day. And then a lot of the times they hand their children over to the public school system, to the state.
Right.
To be educated, quotation marks, but really indoctrinated and brainwashed. And there's this, it really is like there's kind of a removal, almost like hands-off parenting that is going around, that's very popular now.
Right.
And not only does it lead to parents allowing their children to be involved in things they shouldn't be involved in, and schools they shouldn't be involved in, but then it also leads to the children making decisions for themselves. And then you have the trans movement and being like, well, if this is how you feel, you should tell your parents, and you need to make the demands that this is how you feel like a girl now.
Right.
And you need to have this surgery. You need to take puberty blockers or whatever it is.
And they're trying to do that at school now,
right?
Without even the parents consenting. I mean, look at California, Oregon, Washington. I mean, they're setting up centers at the school for kids to get pelvic exams during the day, because children are, can totally consent. If they can consent to that, then they consent to anything. That's my whole argument for the fast track for the pedo agenda. If kids can consent to life-altering, changing procedures and medical castrations, they can consent to anything at that point. Oh my gosh. So that's where that, child rights agenda starts seeping into the education in our schools, from everything from promoting sex work, to you have your rights, you have a right to have sex with whom you want, when you want, any of those things, because you have the right to express yourself. You have the right to, would it be whatever gender you want without discrimination. They're teaching this to kindergartners. So what chance do we have if we're going to continue sending our children, call me judgmental all you want. This is the destruction of our children by our own hands.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I have some family members that work in various types of schools in coastal cities. Some work in public schools where, they're basically forced to pass kids, even though they're not at the required reading and math level. And then some family members that work at like really swanky private schools. And you would not believe the stuff that they tell me. Things like, and I think I've told a couple stories like this on the show before, but they're shocking to me, that it's like the headmaster will email all of the teachers in, let's say a student is named Susie. So the headmaster will email all the teachers that have Susie in their classes. And they'll also email the IT guy. and they'll say, listen, Susie now prefers to go by they, them, and their new pronouns are, or their new name is, whatever it is, like Penny. Let's just say the girl wants to be called Penny. And the headmaster instructs the IT guy to change the girl's name in the system, get her a new badge. Everything in the system needs to have her name changed to her new name and her pronouns changed. And in the email, the headmaster instructs the teachers, if you speak to Penny's parents, use her old pronouns and her old name so that they don't know that she has transitioned because she has requested privacy. So there is a coordinated effort to push parents out of their children's lives. And it's happening in the schools, and the teachers and the IT guys, they just go along with it. And so now the students' quote transition is hidden from her parents.
That's right.
I mean, like, stuff like this is absolutely insane.
It's grooming. I mean, this is a grooming behavior, keeping secrets from parents, showing them explicit, materials, asking them prompts, sexual prompts about their sexual pleasure and what they have experienced, what they'd like to experience. That is grooming behavior.
Right.
And it's becoming normalized. It is absolutely astounding how quickly this is happening.
Yeah. And then another one of my family members said that now when the teachers introduce themselves to the school, whether it's like on the announcements or in the classroom, they'll say their pronouns and their sexual preference.
Okay.
When they introduce themselves.
No.
What? Like when I was at school, my teachers were just these like amorphous blobs that just kind of like showed up to school in the little dress. And like, if I saw my teacher at the grocery store, I'd be like, whoa, it's this really weird experience because you think that the teachers just like live in the basement of the school. You don't know anything about their lives. I mean, like, yeah, sure. The teacher may like bring their kid one day or something but it's like, you don't know about your teacher's lives. And now there's this whole thing of like oversharing your gender. I mean, your sexual preference and your pronouns. It's just so weird now. It's creepy.
It's so creepy, and it's grooming, like 100% grooming behavior.
Yeah.
Being normalized, legitimized, and called something else.
Yeah.
Called education.
So for those of us who are horrified by statistics of child trafficking and even what's going on in the adoption system and foster system and things like that, what can we do? So, people watching the show, what can we do, whether we're parents or even just concerned citizens?
Right. I mean, well, there's a few things. The number one threat with kids being online, besides the astronomical, devastating effects of the mental health crisis of what, kids being exposed to social media. But I want you to look at this like a grooming device because this is connecting them to predators and pornography by giving them access to a smartphone. So, there's alternatives. There's the Gab phone, there's Bark. There's ways to stay connected with your children without putting them at risk. And we partner with different organizations helping parents with those tools. There's the tools available to keep our kids safe. It's a choice. So that's why my message is all about empowering parents. We are in control. We are far more powerful than we even want the responsibility for. And so we really have to reclaim that because we have choices, the environments that we send our kids in, whether we're allowing them to go to sleepovers, whether we give them a smartphone and social media access, whether we send them to a school where teachers, keeping secrets from us. We are consenting. We now know that's going on, and we have choices to make of whether we're going to participate in the destruction of our children's innocence, in the destabilization of their identities, and the destruction of their future, or if we are going to, take a passive role and let it happen.
Yeah, parents, we have to get more involved. And that's something, my daughter's only one, but I think a lot about how, like, what we want our life to be structured like when she gets to the school age. I mean, people are always like, are you going to homeschool or something? I'm like, my daughter's one. I don't know yet. I mean, obviously homeschooling would be nice, but I'm also one of those, I'm very realistic. Like, I do know not every single child does great in homeschooling.
Right.
I know a couple parents. I know this mom in Florida, like her son performed a lot better in school and they were, they live in a great area and he was able to go to a good school, but I'm not saying that homeschooling is the solution for everyone, maybe it's going to be for my daughter. I don't know, but it really gets me thinking now about like what we're going to do when she gets to school age, because I want to be very involved. I remember because I went to a public school when I was all 12 grades, but my mom was always involved. She was there, always dropped me off, pick me up. She was at the parents' meeting. She knew all my teachers, and I always knew that she was present.
Right.
And I think that's so important. Like your kids have to know that you're there.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the number one greatest prevention thing we can do. And I would say connection is the best prevention, because if we are connecting with our children, that bond is so strong and we don't allow it to be chipped away at, undermined, or broken, then not only are we able to prevent bad things from happening, we're able to curate appropriate environments for them, but we're also able to limit the risks involved with things like trafficking, online exploitation, grooming, all of those things, because we are attuned to our children. We can see things in their mental health. And that requires presence. And I know that not everybody can be stay at home. I mean, I work too. My kids do go to school, but there are choices. There are choices of what schools, and if enough parents pull their kids from the grooming factories, there would be a capitalist movement to have new schools pop up. And that is happening. It's just happening to meet the demand. And the demand just isn't quite what it should be, in my opinion, for the amount of exploitation happening in these schools. And I mean, how we have the greatest amount of reports ever of teacher abusers of children. I mean, how many times you turn on the newsfeed and there's, a teacher has raped a child, or a teacher groomed their student, or they had child pornography possession. I mean, we work with a pedophile hunter that catches these guys every week.
Wow.
I mean, across America, and they're teachers or TAs or counselors, and this is an alarming problem. So there is a real risk there. We need to know who the people are that we're dropping our children off, and what their ethos is, and whether they believe the lies or not about gender identity. So we have a great responsibility, and there are risks. There are practical things we do, like, we send our kids to a school that doesn't have the grooming. We let our kids watch YouTube videos with us in a community space in our family room, but they are not on their devices alone in their room. They don't have devices that have social media or unlimited access. I mean, those are practical things, but also educating our kids, equipping them to be able to identify vulnerabilities in other people as well. And to understand how those things are being, used and exploited in their friends and other people and environments, down to what big tech is doing to exploit kids.
Right.
It's warrior mentality of training up our children with all of this in mind, not isolating them and just trying to not tell them how the real world is, but in an appropriate way, arming them and equipping them to combat it effectively too.
And letting children be children.
Yes.
And just letting kids be kids, because I see a lot of 14-year-olds now. They dress like me, or they dress better than I do. And they've got full makeup on, and they get their eyebrows waxed. And I was like, when I was 14, I had bush eyebrows, and my mom would not let me put on makeup. And, I see your oldest daughter, and she's 14 now. And I'm like, every time I see her, I'm like, that's a kid. She's a kid. And I think that's the greatest gift you can give to children, is let them have their childhood innocence, and that's why we look at a lot of celebrities who were child stars. One of the biggest reasons why they struggle so much mentally and spiritually is because they had their childhood ripped away from them. They were not able to be innocent children.
That's right.
And that's one of the greatest gifts that we can give kids, is to allow them to be innocent,
Right.
And I think that's why it's so great to keep kids off of social media for as long as you can, and allow them to be able to talk to people. Like, every time we see your kids, they have such great conversations with us. They get to sit at the table with us, and we joke and we laugh and they participate and they say things and they make eye contact. And it's such a breath of fresh air, because I see a lot of other kids, even from my hometown. We have some family friends that have kids that are 15, 16, 17. I look at them and I'm like, you act like you're 27, and you've lost your teenage years. You've lost your childhood. It's a sad thing to see.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you illustrated that, because there's this idea that they want to make it like, oh, conservative Christian parents, our kids are just, like little Mormon children wearing the bonnet, and they don't know what's going on in the real world, and we don't talk about sex. It's like, no, we talk about all those things in an age-appropriate way.
Right.
I mean, my 9-year-old knows what trafficking is. He doesn't know what graphic sexuality and all that. He knows about good pictures, bad pictures. A great book I would recommend for parents to prepare them, because if they have access to these things, or a school, or they have friends, they're going to see pornography. So they have to know how to identify it, how that you're a safe person to talk to, that there's a plan, there's language there to be able to communicate that experience, because it is a micro trauma when a child has that tattoo impression on their brain forever when they're exposed to that. So we have to have, those tools and equip them. It's just so funny, because there's that notion of that's the alternative. Either you sexualize your child and let them view pornography and, be whatever gender they want and use the cat litter box at school, or you can be this Mormon in a bonnet
Overly
who doesn't
naive.
know. It's like, this is baloney. This is so opposite from the truth. I'm
It's
like, I
all
don't know. Do we need a
caricatures.
reality show to show people like what a normal
Yeah.
family looks like? A
Yeah.
conservative Christian family? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
So-
yeah, they have a completely skewed perception of how we want children to be,
Yeah.
you know, and you can teach your kids about the world in an age appropriate way.
Yes.
Not like the books that we see at the library. So Landon and I went to the
Oh my
library probably a
gosh.
couple months ago at this
Yeah.
point. It was banned book week at the library, Williamson County Library, which is, you know, in a red county. And so it was a little bit concerning when we heard that there were these sexually explicit and sexually graphic books. So banned book week is just like they were displaying, I think it's like a national library list, right?
Yes, the ALA recommends this,
Okay.
this list of the top, you know, I don't know how many 10 banned books there are.
Right.
And then all the librarians are instructed to put this like big display out so that they can market all the banned books so that the kids will be like, oh, I want a banned book. You know, that's how
And
it's
so
supposed to go.
what kind of books were on this list? It was like, was one of them, I forgot the name of that book, Juno Dawson or something.
Yes. Yes. Oh gosh, I can't. Now the name's Beyond Magenta.
Yes.
But one of the ones that is on, I think the top one is This Book is Gay.
This book, this
Yeah.
book is gay. Yeah.
Right. Which, yes, there was a kerfluffle about whether or not they had that or not in their library. Yet it was in their display, so it was a little confusing.
Right.
You can get it online, but okay. So I'm not sure why they'd ban their own banned book.
I know, right?
It doesn't even make sense. I'm like,
not
so
have
you
it?
don't have the banned book that you're promoting that is banned because you banned it?
So
How
you
does it-
banned you banned the banned book.
I think I asked her that too.
celebrating.
And she became livid. I said, so did you ban the banned book?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Will you like tell the story of like how
Yeah.
this whole thing, how we thought we were going in to have a meeting
Right.
with the librarian to genuinely like just ask the questions and try to figure out how we could get some of these removed and what the thought process is and
Yeah.
are 12-year-olds really accessing books like this or
Right. So you and Mike and I went to the library one day just out of curiosity of the banned book week. And so we went in and then we looked at the young adult section, which apparently used to be called the teen section. And young adult is a more vague term where it could include up to age 22, but it could include 16 underage, like who knows what it really means. So we kind of explored the young adult section and then we went into, I think it was also the children's section. And Landon borrowed probably like 7 to 10 books, like a lot of books. And I was flipping through a lot of these in the library. And I'm talking about like very graphic sexual acts described in great detail. You know, like if you have kids listening, I would shut it off right now, but how to give a blowjob, you know?
how to
and
go on Grindr.
yes.
Yeah.
How to go on Grindr, talking about anal sex. And then even some of these books were like memoirs that were from the first person's point of view, like basically having these sexual encounters with an older person.
Yeah. Pedophilia.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we looked at all these books and then we borrowed some of them. And then I reached out to the library director because we actually approached the staff member who was checking out the books. And we said, listen, these seem very inappropriate and graphic. Can you walk us through why these are available? And that lady was very nice. And she said, you know, this is not my decision. I'm a mom too, but I would highly suggest you speak to the library's director.
And she hadn't actually read the banned books, by the way.
Yeah.
Just
Exactly.
side note.
She hadn't even, none of them, I don't think she read. So then we set up a meeting with the director. But when I called the library director, she was on the phone. She was like, what's your purpose for this meeting? Like, I don't get what you want to meet with us because you're not going to be able to change any of the books that we have on the list unless you go through a process of doing the application and filling out the forms. And I said, well, our goal here is to protect children and to make sure that there's not sexually explicit content that's just available for kids to just rent or borrow on their own. So we set the meeting and then Landon and I show up. Mike didn't come to this meeting. We thought it was just going to be with the library director.
And you didn't give my name.
No.
Right. So there was
Yeah.
no tip off because
Yeah, I said a friend and I. I said a friend and I are concerned moms and we would like to discuss some of these books that are available for to borrow at the library. And so we walk into this meeting thinking it was just going to be with the director. And then there was a guy there who was apparently an attorney. So they brought in a lawyer to have a meeting with us about banned book week.
it was very confusing.
And he was very, very nervous. He was like shaking.
Yeah.
I mean, shaking. I was sitting right across from him and you were sitting right across from the director. The table on my end was shaking because
Am I
he was so
scary
nervous.
looking or what?
And then he kept talking about, you know, we're really big fan of your husband. Like,
Yeah.
we're really big fan of your husband, talking about Robbie. And Landon's like, my husband's not here. I'm here. Like, I'm my own person.
Then I was like, do I need an attorney at this point? Like, what is this? This is so weird. This is so bizarre.
It was so strange.
But at the same time, I know that the lady there, like, absolutely hates my husband. So the whole thing didn't make sense.
It didn't. And the woman there, the director I'll say, and I said, she was cold. She was very cold. She was not receptive. She was dismissive, sarcastic. And it was...
Seething would be my adjective.
Seething is a really good one. Yeah. She was seething on the other end of that table. And it took a lot of self-control for me to not, especially the way she was looking at you. I mean, she obviously knows who you are and despises your work probably. And the way that she was looking at you and scoffing at you across the table. And I think we both recorded the conversation. And, you know, I wanted to make sure that we were both respectful, because you're not going to get anything done if you go in and kick and scream. But the lawyer kept saying that the only way that you can get any books taken out of here is if you fill out this form, and it has to go through a process. And they never described what the process was.
Right. And it's a game of whack-a-mole. Like, I knew this going into it. It's just a way to push paper. And if you're lucky at the very end of it, they might remove one, but then they put another one in. I mean, they have an abundant supply of these pornographic books. But I thought it was really interesting that they would not admit, and I guess that's the purpose of the lawyer, because this female adult, Democrat voter couldn't assert her own, opinions without being controlled by this male attorney that was there.
Doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah. So, it was interesting that every time I would ask a very graphic question, because, if this is allowed in children's books, and 12 years old, mind you, has access to these books. We confirmed that.
Right.
If you have a library card or you're 12 years old, you can go and check out books without a parent at the young adult section. So they are procuring books at this library that are accessible to that age. And so I asked her very explicitly, and I was like using words I would never use, reading the books verbatim, what was said. And it was very uncomfortable. And I said, so is that appropriate for children? Is that not pornographic? And she kept saying it's up to it's subjective.
It's subjective.
This is what moral relativism gives us. Like, yes. Nothing's right or wrong. It's okay to sexualize kids. There's no right or wrong. And what is pornography? You can talk about anal sex, but that's not pornography. That's education.
Exactly. That's the loophole. Yes. If it's education.
So they would not say anything was pornographic. Right. And I was like really digging there. I'm like, okay, what about this? And I would read something super explicit.
Yes.
And she would want to, she was seething and she wanted to just tell me off. And then he was like, oh, that's also not pornography. Or he'd correct her. So don't say anything. Don't admit that this is. But you could tell he knew.
And
he knew all of this he was blushing.
We asked what is considered pornographic, and they said they couldn't define it.
They could not define it.
I said, okay. But they also said that they, of course, don't allow pornography into the library. They're like, we're a library. We're not going to allow pornographic content in here. I'm like,
so what is that then?
What is that?
Yes.
I'm like, you can't define what pornography is, but you say that you're not going to bring any pornographic material into the library. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. And it was not exactly a pleasant experience, but it was very telling. Because this is a thing that really made my head spin. Just like you said, if you're 12 years old, you can come and check out books by yourself. Mm-hmm. And I said to the director, so you think it's appropriate for a 12-year-old to borrow a book that teaches them how to give blowjobs and have anal sex? And then her response was, well, it's the parent's responsibility to look at what the child is checking out. I said, okay, so this whole argument, well, it's the parent's responsibility. Then why do we have any rules like at a gas station? Mm-hmm. Why can't anyone under 18 check out a pornographic magazine? You have to show your ID to buy cigarettes, to buy alcohol, to buy pornography at a gas station. So if a 15-year-old or if let's say a 13-year-old at the library, it should just be allowed to check out a pornographic book because the parent should be monitoring it, then why can't a 13-year-old go to the gas station and buy a pack of cigarettes because the parent should be monitoring them, right?
Right, exactly.
So it's these things that just make zero sense, And she would, of course, support that a child has to show, or a teenager has to show their ID before checking out, before buying pornography or cigarettes at a gas station.
Right. And you're also advertising it. There's a big difference. Banned Book Week with your banned book display, books containing sexually explicit pornographic material and content and pedophilia. And then you're promoting that to minors. I mean, there's a huge difference. And they said, oh, we're not promoting it. I said, you have a big book display with the book. What is that called? You're not, I mean, it's like you're talking to a wall.
Yeah,
it's
it
insane.
is.
But it's the same argument they do with the all age drag shows. So what's the parent's job? Well, it's not just the parent. It is the establishment.
Right.
It's the performer. It's everyone sitting by and watching as a child gets a lap dance or a naked, leg split in their face. Like, it's not appropriate. I mean, yes, it's the parents are ultimately responsible for everything. But what I asked, to culminate this whole experience was, I just need to know, is the library a safe place for our community? Because we just want informed consent. If what you're saying is that you guys are comfortable promoting books like this that you can't clearly define as pornography or not, then what you're saying to me is that my children aren't safe here. We're not comfortable here.
Right.
We're not included here.
All right.
And that this is no longer a safe place. And that's really sad.
It
because
is.
It should be a community service. The library used to be an amazing thing that brought everyone together, that is being another pillar of just being destroyed by the left.
Yeah, and it's amazing how the little ways that they get at the kids. So I remember when we were in the young adult section, there was a subsection called religion. And I remember a lot of the books in that section were about gay stuff.
Yes.
LGBT from a Christian perspective.
Yes.
And it was all of these books about LGBT content under the religious section.
Right.
I'm looking at all this. I'm looking at Mike. I'm like, what is this? What's going on? So you're talking about God made you this way. And that's the kind of books that are in the religious section. So even like sneaky ways like that, they will do anything to push this agenda on children.
Gender ideology, all of it. I mean, it's the same thing that the schools are doing, but our community now is invested in this delusion at every turn. And we have to take back these spaces. I think we were probably the only people. They both seemed like, how dare you question us? Like, are we the only ones who ever showed up to say, hey, this isn't appropriate? Or if you're trying to market this book to my child, I'm not bringing my child here.
Right.
I mean, if you went to a park and some rando came up to your child and was trying to give him pornography, you'd call the cops.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know why, we continue feeling safe going to a community center that does the same thing.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's important. Parents, even if you don't take your kids to the library often, I think it's good to go to your local library and see what kind of content is there. I mean, it's good to bring kids to the library as well and let them see what kind of books are available. But like, we are the ones, just like we said many times, like, we are the ones that have to go in and make a stand and say, this is not appropriate for children. I'm a parent in this community and I'm not going to let this happen.
Right.
But I know it's tough. A lot of parents, they don't want to like lose their reputation or lose their job. But honestly, at this point, I'm like, just what's the point?
What's the point in having morals and values if you're not willing to risk anything to keep them?
Yeah.
I mean, nobody went through that more than Jesus. He was hated by people.
Yeah.
And as Christians, we're not called just to be, loved and celebrated by the world. It's actually the opposite.
Yeah. And Jesus said that if you follow me, you're going to be hated by the world.
Yes.
And that's the cross that we're made to bear.
Yes.
And I forgot what scripture it is, but Christ said he came to bring division to the world in a way.
He came not to send peace, but a sword. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So parents out there, you got to get involved. I know it's tough. I know it's not pleasant, and you may ruffle some feathers and you may lose some friends. I know a lot of moms that have lost friends, especially during the whole COVID nonsense. And, because they chose not to vaccinate their children, they lost school friends and things like that. But, our backs are against the wall right now. I don't think people can really hear it enough. Like, we're going to lose the future of this country if we don't fight.
Right. And the message that we're sending our kids, they're watching our moves. And when we tell them one thing at home and then we make them go live out a lie and capitulate and comply with a environment so that they can survive in that environment and have the friends, and they're doing what we're telling them to do, we're endorsing that. Our actions are speaking louder than whatever we're trying to do at home after, and say, like, okay, well, we don't actually believe this. And then we take them to church and, we try to then undo what's been done. Well, they're spending 8 hours a day at school. Yeah. So that idea is not going to work. It might as well not have any values.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the point?
There's no point. Yeah. And that's what I'm, hopefully trying to inspire parents to do is to reclaim their power. Yeah. And it's not about shaming them. It's about, when we know better, we do better. And now we know what the truth is about social media. We know what's happening in schools. We know where this country's headed. And if people, are going to, cancel you, they were never your friends.
Yeah.
And if your school is going to, demonize you and have your kids suffer repercussions because you stand up for the right thing, then is that the environment you even want your child in? You know, so we have to ask ourselves these questions. But, you know, also parents, just get involved in the fight, support organizations, you know, like mine or others that are standing for truth, that are risking things to do what has to be done to save other children, to prevent these atrocities from continuing to occur.
Yeah. So tell everyone where to find your nonprofit organization and how to support.
Thank you. Yes. So freedomforever.us, and you guys can volunteer, you can support our missions, and we have a lot of stuff going on. So please check us out and follow us on social media.
Great. Thank you, Landon. Everyone, please go follow Landon and her husband, Robbie. They are a wonderful family here locally in Tennessee that we're very blessed to know. We love you guys. And I always tell you are my mom inspiration. I think one day you should write a book on parenting. I think it would be such a wonderful thing for young moms to read. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the post notifications button so you know when we're going to post some new content. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
Bye.
Gina.
Thank you. It's weird without Mike, but.